right, welcome back to another episode of the H3O podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Joel Rather. I'm Jason Hirsch, and our special guest today, Brad Petersen. What is your official title with Shield? Sorry, your Shields.
I'm a Fishing Pro staff ambassador.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're also an avid duck hunter.
Yep.
And it's duck hunting season. I think that's one of the main reasons why we wanted to get you in today, was to talk a little bit about duck hunting, duck calling, ice fishing. You know, I think it's that time of year.
Damn it!
Yeah, it hasn't quite frozen here in Denver yet.
No,
it's been more sweaty than cold.
If you're looking at the forecast coming up for the next 10 days, we've got 2 cold days and everything else is 10 degrees above average.
Yeah.
I'm not holding my breath on being ice fishing locally before the first of the year.
Yeah. Well, either way, let's touch on a bunch of that stuff and just kind of go from there. So I guess we could start, just kind of introduce yourself and what you do, what your specialties are, like how you got into all this stuff, and we can go from there.
All right. Well, I'm Brad Petersen. Like you said, I run Brad Petersen Outdoors. I've been in the fishing industry over 30 years now. Started working when I was 16 for in-fishermen at Camp Fish up in Minnesota, and have done a variety of things between tournament fishing, guiding, running kids programs, managing properties. During the whole time, I've also been an avid waterfowl hunter. I helped start the Colorado State Duck and Goose Calling Championships and ran a bunch of programs doing that. Have competed in competition duck calling contests, finished second a few times, won one.
Nice.
But on average, I try to get out a couple times a week at least in the duck blind and chase those around, and have hunted with a lot of the big names in the waterfowl industry. Tim Grounds, Kelly Powers, Fred Zink. You kind of name the guys.
If there's a duck call, basically, it's named after somebody you've hunted with.
I hunted with or met most of them, yeah.
Right.
Maybe not as much the last 10 years. There have been some newer guys show up, but the ones that have been around a little bit longer, yeah.
Right.
I've been around with them and learned a lot from those guys.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it, right? And I think maybe that's a good place to start too, which is, you mentioned starting at a really, teenage years and whatever, which usually fuels the fire. And talk about that. Maybe the progression of how did you decide that, okay, this is going to be not only a lifestyle but potentially something that you'll do as your occupation.
Yeah. Well, I got into it through my dad. My dad was an avid fisherman and an avid waterfowl hunter. So I started waterfowl hunting, probably when I was 7 or 8. And I wasn't hunting, I was just going out with them. And you mentioned going to...
You were the retriever.
No, I wasn't as much the retriever. I think I was the weight of the sled.
Oh, okay.
It was so young that basically I rode on the sled out there at Gene K. Tool that you guys said you guys went and hunted recently. We used to go out there and hunt a bunch of public ground along the South Platte River. And then about when I got my hunter safety card, when I turned about 11 or 12, we joined a hunting club out there near Merino.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we'd hunt practically every weekend out there. And then we got some family land down around Platteville, and we hunt that area. And then on top of that, we've also, I managed a few properties that had good waterfowl hunting, and then was added on to the state blue ribbon panel for the South Platte River duck hunting. And so that kind of, how they manage that was something that I did that went on for about 7 years there.
Mm-hmm.
But my introduction to waterfowl hunting and my real excitement came through my dad. And then through him and some of the contacts that he knew that were really good duck callers, is where my passion for the calling and that side went. But by the time I was 16, I wasn't playing sports or doing anything like that.
Right. You were on the river. I
was headed to, the water to fish, or headed up to go hunting. That's where my passion was. And it started at a real young age.
Yeah. How have you seen, I guess, from when you were a kid to now? I mean, has the landscape here in Colorado changed from, waterfowl or even big game, small game, all that stuff?
I would say the biggest thing is the Front Range corridor has been developed up so much with houses. Mm-hmm. It used to be, you were at 120th and Thornton, and you had to go to Longmont to the 119 exit. And there was a few houses there,
Right.
and then even at Highway 34, you didn't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
You had to go all the way up to Fort Collins. So there was a lot more land
Sure.
Yeah.
to hunt. I will say Colorado's done a great job getting properties along the South Platte River that provide public opportunities.
Right.
Yeah.
But with the more people, you do have issues with crowding.
Right.
So I think the big key for successful waterfowl hunting is you just have to spend more time scouting and really knowing where you're going and where those little hot spots or out of the way spots are, so you don't end up with a ton of pressure around you.
Do you feel like the development has changed the migratory corridor? Like, is it pushed birds that would normally be flying down a certain area and say, all right, there's houses here now, we're going to push further west or east or north or whatever it might be?
Maybe a little bit, but not quite yet.
Right.
The next 5 to 10 years, I think, is really going to shut that down. There's still enough pockets of agriculture that are keeping, particularly the geese along the Front Range.
Right.
Yeah.
There's always been a big wad of birds right along that Front Range corridor, that Severance, Windsor, Fort Collins area for geese. Then you go out to what they call the Golden Triangle,
Right.
which is the Empire Reservoir, Jackson, Riverside area,
Sure.
Orchard. That's always had a lot of birds. And the one thing that's happened out a little further east that's changed stuff up is you have the power plant that came into existence. So that is now a warm water roost.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get past Merino, there's a lot more augmentation ponds, and they pump those during the winter months. So those stay open.
Right.
So a lot more ducks and birds have been pulled off the river bottom to those augmentation ponds than
Sure.
they used to be. They used to be focused on that river bottom.
Mm-hmm.
But what that means is you need to target, if you're able to, those days where you have snowy conditions or windy weather. Those ponds are usually out in the open,
Right.
and the birds don't want to be there, and it's going to push them down
Yep.
to the river bottom. And they're going to be there for a couple days. It'll take them a little while to kind of filter their way back to those ponds.
Right.
So right before the front, probably the 2 days after, if you're able to target that,
Right.
that's where you're going to have the most success.
Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of geese too, in like all the city parks down around Denver, and you can't touch those.
Yeah, there's a lot of them around Denver.
You need that shotgun, that, what do they call it, the one with the suppressor that you can use in the city. I forget
know-
what they call it, but
I
there's a
know the
special
guy
name
that-
for it.
I know the guy that developed it too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the muzzle, the screw-in muzzle is almost 30 inches long.
Yeah.
And it shoots subsonic ammunition. And
Yeah.
it was designed for hunting around Minneapolis, St. Paul
Okay.
on the golf courses, so people wouldn't hear
right.
it,
Yeah.
and the pellets wouldn't go too far.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there's enough opportunities within the city that you wouldn't have to necessarily go. But obviously, there's a lot of people who'd be very upset about that.
When I worked at the University of Denver, our golf coach, and this has been, over 10 years ago, he used to have access to a golf course where they would have a blind on it still. And they would go out and they would hunt on the golf course, geese.
I'm in.
And
Can you call this guy back?
It probably not.
So I don't have to wake up at 3 a.m. to make a 2-hour trip east?
They used to go do that, and then they'd go to the clubhouse and have breakfast when they were done.
Yeah, we never were quite that lucky. We had a spot right at the end of the runway at Centennial Airport, right next to the Broncos training facility.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we actually, I wasn't there, but John Elway is a big hunter, and this is while he was playing. And he came up to those guys as they were coming out of the field one time and said, "You guys are just brutal on me." He said, "I'm out there practicing."
Hearing the shots.
And hearing the shots going off. And he said, "It's the end of the season.
Right.
We know we're out of it, and you're out there hunting." And that wasn't too
Taunting
far.
me.
Yeah, it wasn't too far from the golf course right there off of Arapahoe Road and
Like
Parker. area.
Inverness or whatever that area.
Yep. And so the golf the pro there had dogs that he would run on the field to get the geese to move.
Right.
And so you just had to know what time he was going to
Got to run the dogs.
run the dogs, and the geese would come flying
over.
up there. And it made it a lot easier when you don't have to get up at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, or you can just sit in a blind in comfort, right? Like you were telling stories about back in Ogallala.
Yeah.
Some of the ridiculous blind sets. Like I've hunted with you on your dad's property, And that's a nice blind. I don't know. I remember if we had a heater in there or whatever it might be, but it was like benches you could sit on.
Oh,
And, you had the.
It wasn't benches, it was car seats.
Well, all right, close enough. But it's not sitting on my butt on a piece of frozen, tundra, waiting for a duck to fly by while I'm freezing my butt off. Like,
Yeah.
there was a little bit of comfort there.
Right.
I was spoiled at an early age because I grew up on McConaughey.
Yeah.
And so the west end of that lake is, obviously a massive flyway, and so you can go from, everywhere on that river all the way out to Llewellyn and Broadwater and out towards Sidney, Nebraska, and the birds are just infinite. And so also is the premium of the land that's along there. And so, of course, growing up in a farming community, I knew lots of my friends, and they all had access, and they would put pits and blinds and things like that on their properties. And for me, I was lucky enough that, hey, we're going to go, you want to come? And I was telling him, I had friends that...
It's like a damn bunker with a full-on kitchen and bathroom. And
yeah, we had...
satellite TV so you can watch the Nebraska football game.
Yeah, the shooting deck was plexiglass.
Back when it was worth watching.
Yeah,
right.
Side note, caveat.
Yeah.
They put a thermostat in there. So they had a 500-gallon propane tank buried outside the pit. So they would run heat in there the whole winter. And you'd walk in there, turn the lights on, you were to be heated in there.
I mean, I've heard of
like luxury.
I've heard of some that they have a bunkhouse in the back, and you can go back and
Take a nap.
beds and take a nap. And,
Oh yeah. We used to play cards, and the losers had to watch for birds.
Yeah, and so I've heard of blinds that the guys sit out there and they have a light, a little switch,
Right.
and it shuts off the white light and turns on a red light when the birds are coming in. So you get out of the bunkhouse.
It's like a military setup.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
That's usually what I hear more from the guys down south. Now there is one that was out near Orchard area that a guy by the name of Punchbone had that had electricity and all that. And
Time out. Punchbone?
Punchbone.
That's his legal name, or is that like a nickname?
It's got to be a nickname.
I think it's his nickname.
Okay. I'd be really interested to know where Punchbone comes from.
Well, his dad owned a bar on the west side of town, and it was a bar where all the big fighters would come
There you
who
go.
came in and trained.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't remember but these are like the top of the top back when Ali and Frazier and all those people. And so he had this land, and I know I've heard stories. He had Paul Harvey out there.
Oh wow.
And so you have to kind of look up the stories about him on the internet.
I'm going to have to look up Punchbone and just see what comes
He
up.
used to do real estate, but his
Sounds
hunting
like a
stuff, and
Right.
he was quite the character, to say the least.
Yeah.
Well, with a name like Punchbone, I would assume that you're going to be a character.
Right.
Yes.
You can't just be a normal dude with that kind of a nickname.
No.
Right. So, kind of moving back. So, you progress. What started your guiding? Like how did that become? Was it a tag along thing? Was it something where you go, I think I'm going to make a run at it? Like how did that kind of come to fruition?
It started back in mid-'90s when I started a nonprofit teaching kids and families how to fish and hunt. And so the way the rules are in Colorado, if you charge anything for it, you have to have an outfitter's license. Mm-hmm. So I had to get my outfitter's license to do it, and it continued up until the time that I got hired to manage a ranch for about 10 years. And then as I got out of that, I kind of came back to it. But while I was at the ranch, a lot of the people that came up there were up there to waterfowl hunt. And so I would definitely, take them out. And
Right.
it was more taking people out hunting as opposed to guiding.
Right.
But it's just something I've always had enjoyment.
Go over there and look that way. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not guiding, I'm just telling you where to go.
Well, basically, the difference is whether you're getting paid to officially guide or not.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I was getting paid to manage the ranch,
Right.
Right.
and part of my responsibilities was to take people out hunting.
Right.
No one was getting booked on
Right.
a hunt that they were paying for.
Right.
And so that's where the big difference comes in.
Yeah.
And then I got back into it again, like you say, about 6-7 years ago. I kind of, maybe 5-6 years ago, I kind of started doing it again some more, and just really have the enjoyment of spending time outdoors and doing that, as opposed to, about that same time, I had a couple attorneys I know say, hey, you should go to law school and get a job, we'll hire you. And
Right.
I said, do I have to work in downtown Denver in a high-rise building, or can I have a remote office?
Right.
And they weren't too keen on remote offices
Not back then, right?
Now it may have changed completely.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, obviously, I guess I should ask, did the fish come first or the ducks come first in your world? Because I know you're like, you're like the foremost authority on walleye fishing, here in Colorado, and obviously you're probably more busy during the fishing season than you are during the duck season. But was the duck just kind of like a winter filler, like just keep myself busy, get outdoors, or is fishing still the primary?
Probably the interest in fishing started at a younger age, just because you can get kids out fishing.
Yeah, it's
at
easy.
a younger age.
Drop a line.
But I'd say they both were kind of equal. In college, I probably was more into waterfowl hunting
right.
Than I was into fishing. Just, I had it one semester that I was done at noon on Thursday and didn't have a class until 3 p.m. on Monday, and I would leave and be at the hunting club and hunt all weekend long, and then Wednesday I didn't even have a class.
Right.
So, I could be out
all
5 days a week.
I used to do, when I was in college, I went to Kearney, Nebraska, and a friend of mine, they had a mile of river ground, and we used to plan our schedules during hunting season so that we would have 2 mornings where we didn't have to be in class early, and we could be out at the blind in 20 minutes, and we'd hunt 2 days a week, and it would allow us to avoid the rush of Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
And if we wanted to go hunt on the weekend, we would, obviously, but our success obviously was way better knowing that if we could go hunt on a Tuesday or a Thursday, birds are probably going to decoy better. They're not getting flared around. They're not getting called at so much. And so we were fortunate that we were able to do that. I mean, we used to kill 500-600 ducks a year.
Yeah, and that was probably back when the limit was still 3.
I think it was 5.
Okay.
I think it was 5 then, but I know goose limits were 3 or 2. We didn't have quite as much success goose hunting, but it was mainly just the way with which the river was set there, and we ultimately started to build another spot on that property where we would have more goose hunting success. But we had a warm water slough, so it was just, fish in a barrel.
Yeah, when you can find those, that's not a look. If it's on public ground, that is not something you post on Facebook.
No, that stays out of the forums.
There was no warm water slough at Gene K, just for viewers who are listening. If you're going out there.
Yeah, it's and those change year to year. Which ones are good, which ones aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And the river really changed back in 2013 when we had the flood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Big time.
People really have to go spend some time and figure out where all those spots are.
Right.
You have about a week before season opens up again.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. We're still on
we're still on the split.
The
18th.
mid break.
18th it opens back up. But so talking about obviously you've done a lot for development. You talked about things within Colorado, getting youth out, and then you kind of mentioned the calling part, right? And even competition calling. And we notice this a lot, like in the elk hunting side too, right? Which is, there's a big difference between calling for
those
competition.
Those who can and those who can't.
Yeah. And I know the friend of mine I was mentioning, like he's the guy that would reach over and go, just put that thing away. Like he took other guys in the pit,
just
right?
for reference, I get told that a lot. Not with the elk, but with the duck.
Yeah.
Now,
I'm better on the goose calls, but apparently my duck calls sucks.
I have been guilty of, taking one guy and saying, you know what, your call's a little pitchy. Let me see, I'll tune that up for you.
I'm going to use that.
I'll tune that up for you.
Yeah.
And I grabbed it and I pitched it into the river.
Right.
And I told him if he went to grab it, I could shoot it before he could get to it. So somewhere there is an old duck call that floated down from Platteville.
Right.
Yeah.
That's probably stuck in a log jam
Right.
somewhere.
Yeah,
Right.
that's hilarious. So
Yeah, I'm not very good at it. I think I sound amazing, but that's
we
this
could vet that process.
this is
here
the
with a resident
the
professional.
American Idol thing, like where people go in there and think they sound amazing, and the judges are like, "Yeah, never sing again."
So talk a little bit about that, because I think, and I think this is really common, especially with duck calling. People just assume like, just make noise, right? And
Right.
there's so much more to it in terms of tone, in terms of working birds, in terms of just a lot of nuance. Like, talk a little bit about that, and maybe we'll get into making some noise too.
Yeah, I mean, duck calls, goose calls are very easy. They're designed to make just a few sounds.
Yeah, that's what I'm good
And,
at.
and they all are pretty much the same. You've got two styles. You've got a flute style and a short reed style.
Yeah.
The short reed came from one guy, Charlie Hess. I think he was out of Kentucky. And he created it because his son broke a flute call, and they were out hunting, and they were trying to figure out how to make a call work
Right.
that would still come up with the sound. I heard the story from Tim Grounds, who was then kind of the first person to mass produce the short reed calls.
Right.
Now, the short reed is pretty much the name of the game. That's what everyone's making. But a duck call is much more of a musical instrument. And it takes a lot more science, because depending on the diameter of the mouthpiece, the insert, the curvature on the sounding board, the length of the reed, it all varies. And so there are some duck calls that they're not good.
No matter what you do,
No matter what you do, they aren't designed right.
Right.
Well, I think there's a lot about that too, where the average guy can go into your Shields or your Cabela's or whatever, and they're like, $20, I'll take it, right? And it's like a lot of things that you buy as a consumer, like you typically get what you pay for,
Right.
And
that's a lot of what it is. And who really understands how to make duck calls? And it's few and far between. I mean, back in the day, there probably was about 5 or 6 guys that really understood how to make duck calls, and I would say 3 of them learned from one guy.
Sure.
Right.
And so it takes more to understand how to be really proficient on a duck call than on a goose call. You can get someone sounding like the honk of a goose in a couple minutes.
Sure.
Maybe a few more for a tall fellow in here. But duck calls, it takes a lot more air control and understanding that. So if I'm telling someone to go look for a duck call, what I would tell them to look for is a double reed to start out. Because a double reed, that second reed is helping add that rasp sound to the call. A single reed duck call, you have to impart that rasp on the call. And so you're able to make a wider range of sounds, but it takes a lot more operator control to make that work.
Right.
Whereas a double reed, you probably get 80% of the sound range of a single reed. But you don't have to be quite as skilled of an operator to get that 80%.
Right.
And you were asking about like contest calling and stuff like that. Contest calling, I use every sound they make in a contest call in certain hunting situations.
Right.
Used to hunt Milton Reservoir, which was out, it's out east of Platteville, private lake. And Milton's 1.5 miles long. Well, the ringing contest call, people 1.5 miles away could hear it over the water.
Right.
So I could get birds' attentions that other people couldn't.
Right.
But if you're down in a wooded, river bottom, you don't want to make that sound because it's going to echo all over the place.
Right.
Yeah.
So what really the contest duck and goose calling is more trying to show is who's the best operator of the call and can operate it at the highest and the lowest
Ranges.
end of the spectrum.
Sure.
And do as many different sounds out of that call without making a mistake or what they call scratching.
Yeah.
And that's so Do most people blow contest routines out on the water? No. Are almost all contest callers good hunting callers? I would say as long as they know how to read birds, they are.
Sure.
Yeah.
They're going to be your better ones out there, are the guys who know how to blow a contest routine.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's the other part of it too. I think that, and maybe Jason can even speak to this too. Like
I have no idea how to blow a contest call.
Well, no, I get that, but talking about like reading birds, right? Like, so, from that perspective, right? Which, in relative terms, right? I would say, obviously your experience, far supersedes what, my experience would be even, and obviously would then, supersede what Jason's experience is in terms
By a long shot.
By a long shot, right? But, I've now, waterfowl hunted for probably, roughly 30 years. And so the things that you see, the way that you watch birds and stuff like that, talk about maybe some of the things that, we hunt public land, right? Like we have good fortune at times to get into some private and some little bit more premium land, which obviously changes the game quite a bit. But talk about the public land hunter and the mistakes that you see a lot of guys make in terms of some of those things, right? Overcalling, not reading birds, stuff like that. Because I think success and failures a lot of times come from the guys that, they see a flock and they're just wailing away right away and not understanding, like, how are you going to improve your success in a really difficult, very challenging circumstance of being on public ground where there's usually quite a few guys that have been out there or what have you that could change your fate one way or the other.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk the public river bottom in Colorado.
Okay.
Because we could go on forever if we start talking lakes and ponds and all that.
Sure.
So the South Platte River, for those of you that don't know, is a fairly shallow river. A lot of the times you can cross it in knee-high boots.
Yep.
If, as the reservoirs stop filling, it can get higher. But the prime time is when it's at that lower level or finding those lower areas that have good sandbars.
Mm-hmm.
The first mistake I think people make, if you can't go out and scout the birds, it's picking an area that has quiet water. But the biggest mistake people make is they pick the area that looks the best, but they can't hide themselves good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So it's making sure you've got an adequate hide using typically natural vegetation or combining some logs together and
Right.
maybe putting a little bit of camouflage mesh in there to fill it in. But the concealment factor, so those birds don't see you.
Yeah.
When they get a lot of hunting pressure, most of the people aren't concealing themselves well. So it's going to make the difference of getting those birds from 50 yards to 20 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing people can do, and that takes no skill in learning how to call
Right.
or anything like that.
Labor.
It's labor and putting a little, legwork out there and figure that out.
Right.
The second thing is your decoy placement and the number of decoys.
Yeah.
On most of the public ground, 24 duck decoys is like what I would say is your worst number you can put out there, because that's the most common size spread they're going to see.
Yep.
Most people that go out have about somewhere between 18 and maybe 30 decoys.
Mm-hmm.
So either go a little bit on the smaller side so that you look a little bit different than everyone else, or bring yourself and your 3 buddies and load up bags and make it look like it's the best refuge they've ever
Right.
seen.
Yeah.
Go to the two opposite ends of the extreme.
Right. Exactly.
So when you say decoys, you talking duck and goose, or you just talking?
I'm talking
straight
just duck decoys here.
Yeah, goose is completely different.
Yeah. Now, I like to mix in some goose decoys when I'm out on that river. Shells are real easy to do. A dozen shells gives you an opportunity at a goose. Geese are real hard to call in if they don't see any other geese in the area.
Yep.
And even 6 goose decoys work. And one trick you can do is if you take pipe insulation,
Mm-hmm.
like you would use, in your house,
Mhm.
put it along the bottom edge of a couple of goose decoys. That will cause them to become floaters.
Ah.
And so you don't have to spend
that.
all the effort. You drill a little hole in the front end, attach a little cord to it, and a little weight, and they're going to move real easy because it's just that little foam piece floating.
That's
Right.
a trick I've never heard.
Yeah, but it works.
I guess we're going to go buy some pool noodles.
I'm stealing that right there. That's awesome.
Yeah, but the nice thing about the pipe insulation is it's black.
Yeah.
You just put it right up there. It's got the sticky side to it. It'll hold right on there. And it doesn't add a whole lot of weight like carrying a true floater would
Yeah.
to get out to these areas.
Yeah.
The next thing I would tell people is have, the nice thing with the river is you already have some movement. So vary up the length of your decoy cords, because by doing that, the decoys are going to move differently along the current.
Yeah.
If they're all the exact same length, it's going to look like a bunch of wooden soldiers moving the exact same distance. So vary your length of cord up, and usually I'll hook one or two per dozen backwards, just because it's going to give you a different look. And how often do you see a duck floating down the river, or something like that? So these are things you can do without even, working on your duck calling. So those things.
Basically, you're just trying to set the plate
Yep.
before you ever blow a reed.
Yep.
Set the table to make it look as appetizing as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then I would say the next big key is when ducks are flying the river, and it kind of depends where they are, but typically, they're flying parallel to the river, up or down the stream. It is really hard to get ducks to turn around once they've passed you. So you need to try to be in an area that you can spot them before they're going to get to them, and at least get their attention. And they may not come in right away, but at least you're going to break them up and stop the routine that they're flying on.
Yeah.
Change that wing beat a little bit and make them at least give you a look.
Sure.
If you can do that, that's going to help you get a lot more birds in. If you're waiting to call till they've all passed you, you probably have a chance at maybe 20 to 30% of your ducks is all.
Yeah.
So like hammering and calling, come back, we're here.
It works at times.
Yeah.
But it also takes more skill to operate a comeback call versus just your basic duck calls. So if you're able to just get them to pay attention on the basic stuff, you don't have to be quite as skilled. And you hammer that comeback call all day long, and your cheeks, it's going to feel like you did an ab workout if you're blowing a duck call.
Oh, yeah.
So, those are the tips that I'd kind of give people. It used to be that Robo ducks were absolutely amazing. I think they have their time and place. I think they're better more middle of the day on sunny days to catch the bird's attention. But the one thing I would say is if you're going to buy one, get one with a remote.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
So that you can turn it off, turn it on, and you don't have to go out, stand in the water. And I like one that's got the intermittent setting. So it'll go for a few seconds and then stop and then go for a few more seconds. That will, you're wanting to catch the bird's attention with that. I think anymore, unless they're new birds, a lot of people have one Robo duck, so use it sparingly, but it's not something I would say you need to leave in your truck and don't bring out with you.
Right.
It's still an effective tool, but it's got to be used right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when that first, kind of hit the market, and it was unbelievable, right? Like it was a game changer, because all of a sudden you flip that thing on and birds would be, you could catch birds flying 100 miles an hour down the river, and they see those wings flapping,
Right.
But like you said, it's also become conditioned as well. Now, if every single set of decoys or every single, group that they see fly over has one of those in there, two of those in there, well, guess what? Over time, it's going to dull its effect as well.
Yeah, the one spot that it still has maintained its effectiveness is if you get an opportunity to hunt in the field.
Yeah.
Field hunting, you need to have that to get the attention of the birds.
Right.
And realistically, the more the merrier. But several of those will really help those birds in the field kind of focus in on where you're at. That's the one spot that it's like your American Express card. Don't leave home without it if you're going to a field.
Right.
Because it is really hard to call ducks in if you don't have that type of motion.
Yeah.
On a consistent basis.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we've got the setup.
Mhm.
We know what it looks like. Now, how we call them in? What are the mistakes? What are the rookie mistakes that I'm making? Because it's just me. Because Joel's a perfect duck caller.
Obviously.
And I'm surprised that my call has not been thrown in the river yet. To be honest with you.
He hadn't thought about
But
that
here's
one yet.
but here's the thing. So just let's sidetrack here for 2 seconds. When I have blown my duck call, as bad as they say,
this is anecdotally, mind you.
as bad as they say it sounds, ducks for whatever reason continue to show up.
That's what he says.
Like, and maybe this is because we were on the public or on the private ground when we were doing this. But I'm just saying is that when I blew that thing, guys showed up. When everybody else blew theirs, nothing else showed up.
That's
So
not true.
maybe I'm hitting a new pitch or frequency that it's going to revolutionize the industry.
Notice I'm laughing. Every other guy in the line is laughing as well at the same
Right.
time every time he says this. So,
But I'm just saying is that when I blew it, they showed up. I have to, it's one of the correlation things, right? Like it happened. Can't deny it every single time.
There are miracles that happen all the time.
Thank you.
A bunch of college hockey players can beat Russia.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, you've never heard me duck call.
We can vet that out, right?
Yeah, let's. But all right, let's go back to. So it says, what are the rookie mistake? Obviously, you said that by waiting for them to go past your setup, it's too late.
Right.
Like so. All right. So I'm sitting in our blind. I'm well concealed. I've got my setup. I can see some ducks coming down the river.
Go.
Let's just say they're a quarter mile away. What's the play?
Okay. There's 2 different ways when you see those ducks. If you see the ducks and they're already cupped up coming into you,
Leave them alone.
just don't do anything.
Swallow your
Don't
whistle.
change.
Right.
Yeah. If you start calling to them, don't overcall them and try to. A lot of people down in the Arkansas say kind of call them on the corners. So get their attention and then call them when they're not right over top of you real heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, the one thing that I learned from Tim Grounds when it came to duck calling and goose calling was they're just, when you find out the sound that bird that makes the first look at you,
Mm-hmm.
changes the wing beat, the head changes, that's the bird you're wanting to try to call to.
Sure.
So you're trying to read that bird, find that bird out of the group, and then do whatever keeps that bird interested.
Yeah.
And keep repeating it as long as you keep that bird interested in working properly. But don't just, if you're calling hard and they get close, don't completely shut up.
Mm-hmm.
Ducks just don't do that, in nature.
Mm-hmm.
But just like if they're real quiet, don't when they're at 80 yards and they're cupped up coming in, decide to pick up the duck call and start blowing because the ducks are going to go, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What all of a sudden changed everything down there?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably the biggest mistake people make. And the thing that once you learn how to operate a duck call, the biggest thing for people to learn is how to read the birds.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't come, there's not videos you can watch.
Right.
There's not a
It's
YouTube
a
channel
real
about
world
it.
experience.
It's getting out and experiencing it firsthand. And, different species of birds take a different amount of calling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's where the real challenge comes in as far as it's hard to just to say what the mistakes people make are, but I would say stay basic initially. Don't try to go wild and crazy beyond your skill level.
Right.
When you do that is when you have a day that the ducks are all over the place, or you've already thrown out everything, including the kitchen sink, and so
Right.
what do you have to lose? That's when Jason gets the call.
Right. Well, so, I mean, you brought your lanyard in here and you've got 75 duck calls on it, right? I'm assuming each one's got its own tone or characteristic to it. Like if I'm a beginner, like I bought a duck commander duck call off some website. right? Like it's a very basic one, but the difference, obviously you get higher caliber ones, but they all have different sounds to them, right? Like if I'm a beginner, what's a good, well-rounded kind of type of call that I'm looking for?
All right. Like we said before, you're looking for a double reed. Hopefully you can see that there's 2 reeds there. There's the upper reed and then the lower reed there that's going to make the sound.
Right.
All right. That's the first thing I'm going to look for. I'm going to look for what's called a Jframe call, which is like this with a wedge. If you looked at your Duck Commander call, the reeds go in, they're riveted together, and then it just has a piece of stopper above.
Right.
It doesn't lock everything in when the call's apart. Now, I want this because you're able to tune a call a lot more when you have this, whereas kind of Duck Commander style, I've hunted with Phil and Willie and Jace, and the Duck Commander style works very well, but my personal take is I enjoy the J-frame style a lot more because it allows me to make adjustments and make it sound better.
Right.
So that's what I'm going to say is look for a double reed call. Don't go with an acrylic. Calls come basically in 4 materials. This is kind of polycarbonate, which is plastic.
Right.
All right. Wood, and then acrylic. Acrylic is your hardest material, which means and plastic being your softest. The plastic or polycarbonate will kind of absorb some of those fringe sounds and mellow stuff out a little bit. Acrylic is going to put out exactly what you put in. So if you're not sounding exactly right, it's like
it's unforgiving.
It's unforgiving at all.
Right.
Eddie Van Halen could play a guitar that's just slightly out of tune.
Right.
But if anyone else puts it up there,
they would sound awful.
They would sound absolutely awful.
Right.
And so,
or your ear would go, something's not right there.
Yeah.
And that's what the ducks are doing.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would say go with a double reed. This call right here is the 10 ground sweetmeat. It is a call that he made, put a wood barrel on this as an echo insert. Echo and Rich and Tone, if you go to the World Duck Calling Contest, those 2 brands of calls have won more than anyone else. Butch Richenbach, who started Rich and Tone, he's the one that has taught tons of people how to make duck calls. And so those 2 both come out of Arkansas. They're both good quality calls. Buck Gardner makes some other good calls. And there's a lot of different manufacturers, but you can find usually an Echo or a Rich and Tone type polycarbonate call. Again, this is Tim's call is using an Echo insert. I bet you there's at least 5 to 6 different call manufacturers that use this exact insert.
Gotcha.
Something that Rick did when he created this, it's the perfect mold. So then, and we're going to be trying this out. We're going to see if it actually works with the microphones.
Sure.
The next big key is how you hold a duck call. Duck call is a one-handed operation, and you do not use a glove. A glove will absorb the sound, so this hand, whichever hand, right or left, needs to be exposed.
Right.
So make sure you got a good pocket. If you get cold, have a hand warmer in there, whatever.
Sure.
You take the insert of the call, you put it in the crotch of your hand, and you wrap your fingers around, kind of like you've got
I'm going to follow
let's
along
say
here.
Tutorial.
Let's say a racquetball or a tennis ball.
Right.
Curl it up even more.
Oh, my hand?
Yeah. Yep. So what that's doing is it's kind of creating a sound chamber, but it's also creating a little bit of back pressure.
Gotcha.
All right. Then you're going to put the call to your lips like you're drinking out of a pop bottle. So to the bottom lip.
It's a Coke bottle for those who are not from the Midwest.
You would.
Soda, pop.
Or a Dr. Pepper bottle for those from Texas.
Hey, Texas boys got to get the Dr. Pepper in there. All right. So.
And then put it tight. And you're going to squeeze your lips on the side tight. Now what you need to do is you need to use warm air,
Not cold air.
not cold air. So I'm going to explain the difference. Hopefully you can.
I'm
figure
following
it out.
along. Don't worry, we're following
I'm
along.
going to be putting steps down.
So-
Yeah.
So
Show notes.
so cold air is like you'd blow to cool off soup
Yeah. Okay.
from
See?
your lungs.
Right.
That's what I've been trying to get him to understand. Yeah.
Warm air
You need from the belly.
comes from the diaphragm, and the best way I can describe it is it's like you're trying to fog a mirror
Yeah.
or fog your glasses.
Sure.
It comes from deeper. Yeah, it's more of a diaphragm sound, and that's the air you want to be giving to make a duck call sound properly.
Mhm.
Now, when you go in there, you're going to use your tongue needs to hit the back of your front teeth
Mhm.
to cut off your note. And a lot of people will use different sounds like gack, wit, quack.
Mhm.
Gack is the one that I've used, and you want to make sure that your tongue slaps the back of your front teeth really hard to cut that note off.
Oh, okay.
If you're not cutting it off, it kind of sounds like you're blowing a kazoo. You hear a lot of
I've heard that
out there.
before. I've heard that before.
Yeah. And so you're trying to make sure that each note is separate.
Okay.
So when you do it, it's going to kind of sound like, and you hear that hard end
Right.
on it. That's what you need to make sure you're slapping that tongue against your teeth and just completely cutting the air off there.
Right.
All right? So put the lips up here.
Here we go. Here we go.
Moment of truth.
This is amazing. I'm excited.
And so what you're going to say is gack.
Like there's something going on down in there.
Guttural.
Yeah, that is definitely guttural. So it's gack, right?
Gack.
Without moving my lips.
You're trying to put too much guttural into it.
Yeah.
It's more with air pressure. So to get that raspiness, you're controlling your air and you want to pop it to get the reed to start going.
Right.
Open your hand up a little. Okay. You're still not cutting it off quite. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. So yeah, that's like a
It's almost like your teeth are slapping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
All right.
You have no idea how much you're helping me right now.
That's why we're here. We're learning.
This is awesome. I love it.
So that's your basic quack. Now you were doing them a little bit on the shorter end.
Okay.
Okay. So you want to make sure on a quack by itself, it's not real short because that's the warning sound of a mallard hen. So you want to just extend that out a little
Now I
bit.
see why you didn't want me to.
Open your hands up just a little. You're not cutting it off again. There you go. There you go. You're getting it
Yeah.
better there.
Right.
So that's your basic quack.
Okay.
If you know how to quack, you're going to be able to do a basic greeting call, which is a 5-note series, and it's basically a step down. The first one is the loudest and the longest, and then you just step down a little bit softer and shorter, and you just do 5 notes. It doesn't have to be exactly 5, but it's the one you hear at the park,
Yeah.
most of the time.
Wah, 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 wah.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's
It's like they're
what
laughing at you,
yes,
which they do.
when you're calling, they do.
When my fellow hunters in the blind aren't laughing at me, the ducks are laughing at me.
It sounds like you're real entertaining with this call.
I tell you, I love duck hunting. Right? I don't know what it is about being cold and wet and being on the river. I just love it, but it's got to be fun. Like you can't just sit there and twiddle your thumbs.
We have a good time.
So that's why I like. It's better for me than like big game hunting because I can talk, right? And I don't have to be quiet and whisper all the time.
There's 2 things I love about waterfowl hunting. One is the social aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's 3 parts. There's the social aspect, there's the dog work, And to me, I like something that's challenging, and it's the challenge of bringing those birds to you. You're not going and chasing them. You're bringing them to you. So you created a situation with your decoys that looked real, that your blind was concealed enough that they didn't see you, and you sounded realistic enough to bring them to you.
This is the same argument I have, or the same logic I have when I go fly fishing. If I have tied a fly, I have mimicked a creature in nature, and I have thrown it in the water and mimicked that creature in its habitat, and I'm tricking an animal into eating that fly, and then I'm catching, like, that whole process to me is the challenge.
Right.
And that's what I love about it. Like, even when we go elk hunting, like, if I can sound like an elk and that elk sounds back to me and goes, I don't like that guy, I'm going to go fight him, then, like, that's the exciting part of it.
Yeah. And that's the reason I prefer archery elk hunting over rifle hunting. But there's a different set of skills to each, and, you know, to each kind of your own personal taste.
100%.
So let's hear your.
Let's do a greeting call, which is going to be a 5-note series. And so what I'm doing is, to get that longer note, I'm going gah. You have to hold that A. The G at the beginning is what gets the call to go in that rasp.
Mm-hmm.
The ah, you know, the ah in the middle is how you just keep the length, and then the k at the end is what ends it. So you can make that middle portion as long as you want.
Let me do one real quick. Whoop, that was not it.
You're back to blowing.
Yeah. No.
You're still keeping it real short. Just do, okay, let's extend just your quack. Just do a gack. You're not popping it enough at the beginning. Closer, there. There you go.
There it is. Nope, that's not it.
That you blew in there you go. There you go.
All right.
Now you see how you could now even extend that even out even further. There you go. Okay. Now that's too long for a normal quack.
Right.
But if you start,
I'm just trying to get the mechanics of it.
right. That's what we're trying to do, is get you the basic mechanics. So now, if you're doing like a greeting call, you have that longer one on the first one, and then start stepping down.
Right.
So try to.
Like stepping down. Obviously, I wasn't.
Okay, what you did on that, you're doing kind of a little pickup at the beginning. You're kind of doing yak.
Right.
It's
Instead of just hammering.
Yep. Right. Then the first note you cut off with the k, and the rest of them you went ga 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 ga. You never cut the notes off.
Mm-hmm.
They each need to sound like an individual note.
Gotcha.
And it just takes some practice to get that.
Right. Yeah.
And more than anything,
we clearly don't have enough time on this podcast.
I think the biggest thing is hearing when you're doing it right and doing it wrong, and being able to realize that to your own ear.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you just get the quack down, the second thing, if you can do a feed chuckle, those two things will put you, if you can make a quack sound right and you can do a proper food chuckle, you're probably doing better than most people that are out there.
What I tell Joel is I can roll my R's, I can brrr, but I can't do the way, like, he's really good at it. Like that part, but it's like the
you
control,
sound really good like
the controlled breaths, right? Like that. Yeah,
I don't use
much
that.
Better at it.
I don't use that food chuckle much at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's more of a sound that you hear when ducks are flying over top. That real machine gun food chuckle.
Right.
So I'm going to teach you a real easy way to do it.
Okay.
You have kids.
I do.
At some point in time, you baby talk to them.
Yes.
That's all you need to do into your duck.
I also have a dog, and I baby talk to him, so
I don't want to know anything more about that.
Oh, Mickey puppy.
But if you just do goo goo, gaga, gee gee, that will give you kind of the basics of a food chuckle. And then you just vary your hand up to change the tone of it and do the speed. So just do the. You're blowing. It's not coming from down. You're trying to create.
Yeah, I'm trying. That's why
with your
I'm
larynx.
trying to like instead of
No,
roll my
just
R's.
Go.
Distinct on the end.
Yeah.
That's
You're blowing. Your air's coming from up here.
Right.
Get lower.
I need to go.
When you get done duck calling, it should feel like you just did 100 sit-ups on a long day of duck
I mean,
calling.
I don't know if you've seen that there ain't no sit-ups going into this body.
I know. That's the reason
so
it should.
I do.
That's
I
why
do,
it's like that.
I do tick.
Yeah, you can do. Yeah, you can do ticket, and roll it like that.
Yeah.
But realistically, that's a sound you hear more as ducks are flying around
Yep.
than the food chuckle on the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier for people to learn the basics, the baby talk.
Yeah.
And I learned this from a guy named I think it's Keith Allen, and he had a thing called the Refuge Man, and he did a CD with all duck call sounds, and it sounded like a duck refuge from the sounds he was producing out of his duck call. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
But so what you want to do?
Is it easier to like try and like it without a call in your mouth, like try and figure out how to create that
No.
diaphragmic sound?
No.
Because you'll never know the result.
Okay.
So cup your hands a little tighter. Okay. Now just go. There you go.
Yeah.
So that's that. I was doing goo goo.
Mhm.
Now do gaga. Okay.
That's getting closer. Yeah.
You had a little bit more practice, and you were a half step apart
Okay.
sound wise. If you get a step apart, it sounds like two completely different.
Right.
And then you can just do like goo goo gaga gee gee.
Right.
But you're trying to put too much throat in it.
You do it, so I can. Because if I hear it, I can just do the first two notes. Because if I can hear it, I can do it. Go ahead, do it again.
You're blowing.
Yeah.
There, that's getting closer. Your hands are too cupped down on there. You're
No, now I'm blowing, right?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
like that sound, like I'm in a disco, right? I go,
Yeah.
right?
There you go. Right there. There you
Yeah,
go.
that's it.
Yeah.
Then I just got to do it a lot. So I
Yeah,
remember.
and you can just you can
Couple thousand
bury
more
your
times.
hands
Yeah.
up. You just need to make sure that you don't cut it off too much.
Right, because then
'Cause
it's
you go-
good.
It's
Right,
the exact same amount of air pressure, same
Right.
column,
right.
and you heard how varied the sound is. In
Sure, sure. Yeah.
And one of the things you can do when you're out calling, if you don't feel comfortable making a couple different duck sounds,
Mhm.
you go blow into your sleeve.
Right. Well, it's like
It's
what
a
we do
completely different
with an elk
sound,
call,
yeah.
right? It's the same thing with an elk call. I'm blowing here, and then I'm cupping and going over there, and cupping going over there, and yeah.
Exactly, and that can make one duck call sound like multiple ducks.
Right.
Right. Well, I think that's the other part of it too. Is I know, like I've always said that that there is some simplicity in it too.
Right.
Like is as much as you can really dig into minutia of some of the stuff that you just went through. Like you said, if you can find two, right, like two things, which is that goo goo gaga and doing just a basic quack, and then you just work your way into can you slowly connect,
Right.
like you said, into that welcome.
The one thing to understand is the quack, depending on your call, is going to be heard at a distance.
Mhm.
Okay? The food chuckle is 100 yards max on a calm day. So that's something to use when the ducks are close
Mhm.
to keep them interested. But you have to use that quack at a distance to get their attention.
Yeah.
That food chuckle sound just doesn't carry real well.
Right.
And so just figuring out how to make a good solid quack that's a little louder, and you can just keep going quack, 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 quack. I mean, you've been to little parks. A
Yeah.
lot of times, that's all you hear going on.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't have to be
That's why I want to
too...
hunt there.
Yeah, you don't have to be too extravagant with it.
Yeah.
But, for me, the other thing I would tell you with, let's take this as just a single reed call. With a single reed call that uses a cork insert, and this one I put a new cork in September.
Okay.
I probably need to replace this because it's going to be flat. So
the tone will be flat.
The tone will be flat because it's lost some of its resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why having, kind of a plastic insert of some sort in here,
Right.
that will hold its shape a lot longer. And you don't have to worry about that flatness coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start going with like a single reed call like this, it takes a lot more being able to tune the instrument.
Sure.
And it becomes a little more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I carry this mainly for where I hunt right now down on the river bottom. I carry it for real windy days.
Yeah.
It's windy days, your sound doesn't carry as far. A loud acrylic call,
You can
single
hammer it.
reed. I know that downwind, I'm going 3/4 of a mile probably, maybe a mile with that call. I mean, it's not a super, super loud one.
Right.
But upwind, whereas a normal duck call, they might only hear you 7,500 yards.
Right.
I could get 200-300 yards, 400 yards up with that loud
Mm-hmm.
Right.
call. And so just having all these calls, it's just having part of the toolbox, but you can see the one that's my favorite right there. I've got 2 of them.
Right.
Just in case something happens to it,
You got to
Yeah,
back up.
back up.
back up. And the other tip for people coming up on late duck season, once you're done blowing your call, it always needs to go inside your coat. That will keep it from freezing up.
Freezing up.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I've had that
that's a
happen.
big one. Yeah.
I'm sitting there trying to blow it out. Stick my finger down in there, trying to loosen the reeds up.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you keep it, and that's why I have 2, one's always for sure
Right.
in the coat. But that's the one other mistake I would say people make.
You got to keep the chew spit moist.
Yeah, make sure that if you have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it's creamy. You start putting chunky down there and get a piece of peanut stuck between those reeds,
Yeah.
Not good.
you're done.
Yeah, not good.
That makes sense.
So, talk about and you hear this a lot when you talk to guys that have guided and things like that. There's the pluses and minuses, right? Like, what are the things that are most enjoyable to you, and what are the things that make a tough day on the river?
I really enjoy working with people that want to learn something
Yeah,
because we're dealing with wild animals. I have no control over whether the birds decide to fly,
yeah,
whether they've migrated down or not,
yeah.
Sure.
whether the fish decide to bite that day.
Right.
There's
There's no guarantees.
no guarantees. You do everything in your power to make that happen.
Yeah.
But someone who comes with an attitude that they want to learn how to do something,
Mm-hmm.
they always walk away
Happy.
happy and having something that they've received from the trip.
Right.
And those are the type people that are going to be successful down the road because you're learning from the experienced people.
Right.
Well, Joel's very happy that you taught me how to do that and I'm very happy as well because
also
now I've
noticed-
got a new toolbox.
I also
a new tool in
noticed
my
you have a
toolbox.
cork insert in there.
Yeah, I just took that off and I saw that.
Yeah.
And so you probably need to go to you can
This
either
is
contact them-
literally brand new. I think it came on 2 days ago.
Okay, then that one's good. But what you do when you do that is sometimes the call manufacturers will send you extra cork. If not, you can go down to a train store,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Like a hobby store.
hobby store,
I save all my wine corks.
and pick that cork up. But when you put the cork in, you want to put it in your mouth, chew it for a while, get it moist, a little softer, and it'll fit in there tighter.
Right.
And then as it dries out, it'll harden up. And so that's it. But, I love seeing new people into the sport, sharing information,
Yeah.
but just being out there and getting to see some of the things. When you're out there
Yeah.
every day, you experience things that, very few people will, whether it's a big fish or the last duck hunt I had, we had a guy hit a teal and it was wounded and it went up on the sandbar across and they shot a couple more times to try and get it and it went into a bunch of weeds. And I was about to send my dog out over it. Here comes a hawk from the tree, comes down, hops in the weeds, gets the teal to jump out of there, grabs the teal, and flies off with it.
Ha!
Really?
You don't see that every day.
No. That's cool, though.
You know, and so you see some things like that are just.
Do you have to remind your hunters that you can't shoot the hawk?
Yeah.
That is not a duck.
Yeah,
That is a
right.
federal crime.
I actually sent a message to one of my friends who was a game warden, and I said, you know, what's the bag limit for a hawk taking my ducks? Because once he's over, I'm calling and turning him into Operation Game Thief.
That's funny.
And so,
I'm sure you enjoyed that.
yeah, he had a pretty good chuckle out of that one.
Yeah.
If I was of the younger generation, I would have grabbed my phone and recorded it.
Of course.
Right.
But, you know, I'm just like, ooh,
It
this
would have
is
been
cool.
on Instagram or Nature is Metal.
Yeah.
It would have been on one of those accounts already.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but I think that's a lot of what it is what really attracts me to the outdoors is every day is different.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking the past knowledge that you have and utilizing that to make the best decision you can on that given day.
Mm-hmm.
But there's almost no 2 days that are exactly the same.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're fly fishing on a stream and maybe the flow changes 4 CFS is all.
Yep.
It changes stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe all of a sudden a new bug starts hatching that day.
Yep.
And the fly that you caught every fish on, you caught 20 fish, you thought you were the top dog on the river the day before.
Right.
And something else starts hatching and you can't buy a fish on your fly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the
I've had
fun
lots
part.
of days like that.
You know, and I learned, I've heard a story from Al Lindner and when he was fishing bass tournaments real early in the DASS years.
Mm-hmm.
And he fished, I think it was down in Missouri or Arkansas somewhere. But he was fishing a tournament and he had caught 2 or 3 fish and he came up with the take of, you know, man, it was tough. The fish just weren't biting. And he went to the weigh-in, and this is back in the day when you bring your fish in on a stringer.
Yeah.
Right.
And Bill Dance had a stringer of like 15 fish
Yeah.
and just blew everyone out of the water.
Right.
And it wasn't that the fish weren't biting.
They weren't biting what he was throwing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You just didn't figure out what was going on.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of the good things I like about fishing is because you know the fish are in the water.
Right.
It's a matter of convincing them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Duck hunting, we do have to rely a little bit on our northern birds coming down to us.
Right.
So when those birds aren't there, you really have to spend your time. You know, this year on the river, the migration and stuff freezing up hasn't been normal.
Right.
It's been way behind. So you really have had to find those spot on the spots, those sweet spots on the river.
Mm-hmm.
And you still can have some success or pick the days when it was windy
Mm-hmm.
or a cloudy day, something like that changed it up just a little bit.
Right.
If you just went to your favorite spot and you said, the weekend before Thanksgiving, I can always go here and there's
Sure.
always ducks. Well, the weekend before Thanksgiving, all the ponds are normally frozen.
Right.
So you go to your favorite spot and you don't see any birds.
It's not your favorite spot anymore.
You know, it wasn't the fact.
I do that with fishing all the time. I I always catch fish here.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
You
And then
fish
you show
memory.
there and you're like, well, the fish must not be here today.
You're fishing memories.
Yeah.
And so
I'm a creature of habit.
it wasn't that, you know, you picked a bad spot. You just picked the wrong time to be in that
Right.
spot.
Sure.
And so the error kind of falls back on you if you're an outdoorsman who really evaluates, okay, what went wrong?
Well, I'm stubborn. That's what went wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah.
I have a pattern that I fall into, and if it doesn't work, then I throw my hands up. It's not like, you know, and I've been better about that as I've gotten older and wiser and realized like, hey, I'm not going to sit here and beat the water for, you know, the next 5 hours in the same hole. Like, I'm going to walk down the river until I find an area where something is working.
Right.
Fish are biting, right? They're swimming, they're feeding, whatever it might be. The same thing with ducks, right? Like we can be, you know, we do this with elk too, right? It's like, you know, we get locked into, we're camping here and this is where we're hunting. Well, there's no elk here. We're camping here and we're hunting here, right? Regardless of whether there's elk here or not, this is where we're camping.
Yeah.
And so we've gotten a little bit wise to the fact that, you know what, we need to be a little bit more mobile and be willing to kind of go outside those comfort zones because if they're not here, we got to go find them again.
Can't make them be there.
Well, and I think that's what separates some of the really skilled anglers and hunters versus your casual.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm going to hunt a spot, a lot of times I know what area I'm going to the night before.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a piece of public ground.
Sure.
I don't know what spot I'm going to hunt until I get there and see what the weather's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I may know that there's 4 spots in here, but 2 of them with an east wind are just terrible. And if you have your heart set to hunt one of those spots, you go out there and don't even think about what direction the wind is until you set up.
And then you sit
in
there
the
and you
first
go,
half hour.
oh crap, the wind's the wrong way.
Yeah, the first half hour you go, why isn't it working? Then all of a sudden you look and you go, the wind changed on us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, makes it work with it.
And fishing's the same way. And I learned, a lot of that. I also fish a lot of walleye tournaments. And, I get people that Tuesday pre-fishing for a tournament that starts on Saturday, like, we got it all figured out.
Till Saturday.
And it's like,
Right.
okay, well, Tuesday was sunny and warm.
Right.
We have a cold front that's coming in, and we're supposed to be cloudy and windy on Saturday and Sunday. What you learned Tuesday was the general area the fish are in.
Right.
If you try to go fish for those fish, more than likely, you're going to struggle for that day.
Right. They're either A, not going to be there, or B, not bite what they bit
Right.
4 days ago.
Yeah.
And you have to be, willing to make those decisions and make changes on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when it comes to fishing. I think that makes a big difference on fishing.
Right.
But waterfowl hunting, goose hunting, when you go set out a big spread on a pit,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to go pack it all up and
Right.
go somewhere else. But you know what? You may all of a sudden go, we need to change the way the spread looks.
Sure.
Oh yeah, we used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
And you got to understand how that is not just it's not just a portrait to the ducks and geese. It's also a presentation.
Yeah.
And the way with which they're going to, if you're lucky enough for them to decoy or start to, how they're going to actually decide to move their way into that spread.
Yep.
Right. And guys do that all the time where they just go out and just randomly throw out decoys. And with this, we could talk a whole other podcast about that. Like there's some know-how to that as well. And you could set them up entirely wrong. And guess what? They land outside of that. They're out of range, right? All these other things that, again, are experience related. Understand, like you said, the wind and those things become small little trinkets of success or failure in your hunt.
Yeah, and it makes a big difference, like you say, on the success or the failure. Those little details, the people that are consistently successful are paying attention to those little details.
Mm-hmm.
Be it archery elk hunting. I know you guys like to archery elk hunt.
Yep.
Okay, the guys who really understand how much moisture is in the woods and really understand their area, on a wet year, the elk are going to be in a completely different spot than on a dry year.
Yep.
And you have to really know your area. And you know what? Guys also may say, this spot's good when it's wet. I've got an over-the-counter tag. I need to be 200 miles away when it's dry.
Yeah.
Because that's the area I know for hunting in dry conditions.
Sure.
Right.
I haven't figured out where these elk go when it's dry.
Mm-hmm.
But I know if it's wet, this is my spot to go.
Right.
Yeah.
And those guys, you sit there and go, why all of a sudden did you pick to go that way? And they're like, oh, because I, went up scouting and I noticed that, these 2 wallows that they always use were dry.
Right.
Okay. On those years, I go down further away and hunt that area because I understand it better.
Right.
For sure.
And I think that's one of the big things people are learning because we have so many people that are new to fishing and hunting, particularly with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
COVID brought a lot of people, maybe not that they've never done it before.
But now they had an excuse to go do it.
Well, but maybe they did it with their grandpa when they were growing up.
Sure.
When they were real young. And then they didn't do it through their 20s and 30s. Now they have some kids. They were looking for something to do when COVID was here. And let's go back fishing.
Mm-hmm.
But what's changed for that amount of time, there's a lot of learning curve
Right.
Yeah.
to get caught back up. And I think one of the things us as outdoorsmen do that is a challenge for the new people coming in is we make it seem so complicated.
Yep.
Yeah.
When it comes to baseball, a pitcher, the second day, you don't teach someone how to throw a curveball.
Right.
It's, it's how do you basically throw the ball?
Mm-hmm.
How do you hit the target?
Right.
How do you hold it? But too often I think we try to tell everyone that, you have to be doing all this stuff to be successful.
Right.
Walk before you run, just
Mm-hmm.
like with the duck calling. Learn how to quack before you start doing all the real fancy stuff.
Yep, for
If
sure.
you learn how to quack, you learn how to food chuckle,
Mm-hmm.
you're better than 50% of the people out hunting public ground right now.
Right. We talk about that with a lot of things, right? Which is just become really good at simple things.
Yeah.
Right. And if you can do that, you don't have to overcomplicate it, right? And guess what? Your odds of success are going to go up, right? Yeah. And like you said, I'm a huge believer the same way, right? Like, how many days have you had where you're like, today's probably the best bet, let's not call so much, right? And allow the birds to make decisions and just maybe give them just enough direction, let them do the rest. Like, I can remember an old boy that we used to goose hunt with, and we're young and ambitious and all this, and we'd see geese coming off the refuge and stuff like that. Guys are wailing away, and old boy in the corner goes, they're getting here as fast as they can.
Right.
Right? Like stuff like that, and you go, oh, so you mean like if we just keep hammering away, they're not going to hurry up, right? It's like things like that where, you can simplify stuff and really improve, where if you don't get in your own way, sometimes it will yield better results.
Right. Now, I will say I almost always start calling to the first couple bunch of ducks, see how they react.
Yeah.
And then that's going to tell you a lot. But there's times that after the third, fourth bunch, you're like, they don't want to be called to.
Right.
So let's do other things.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Let's let them do this on their own.
Yeah. If they want to do it on their own, I can't screw that up nearly as bad as you can when you call it.
Right. Exactly.
Everything you add that you're doing is more of an opportunity for you to mess it up.
Sure. Yeah. Well, tell people how they can find you. Obviously, we could talk, I think, for hours and hours, and there's a lot of avenues we can go with this, but where do people find you and how to maybe either book a hunt with you or learn more? I know you do a lot of other things like with shields, and I've heard you on various podcasts. I know you do some radio. Just kind of give people a way of finding you and maybe picking your brain more or hearing more about it.
You can find me on Facebook at Brad Petersen Outdoors. You could give me a call, shoot me a text at 303-829-3998. I'm at Shields. We just finished the ice fishing event. There will be a spring fishing event coming up. So I do a lot of stuff up there. Pay attention to the Johnstown Shields location.
Yeah.
And then I'm on Terry Wickstrom Outdoor Radio Show. Yeah. And that's typically about every other or every third week. I'm on there. Terry usually has a lot of great experts that are up to date with the information. You're getting people that have been out in the field that week and are giving you that straight information. Whereas, a lot of the other places you go, you might be getting 2-week-old information.
Sure.
So,
going back to what we just talked about, that may be expired.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge. I appreciate you teaching me how to duck call.
Right.
I want to see pictures.
Yeah.
Of birds that you actually called in.
Yeah. Well, like I say, we're going to walk before we run, so I'm going to have to go home and practice, and I might have to pick up.
Okay, you're talking about practicing. To keep your kids and your significant other happy.
I do it in the car.
Okay, you can do it in the car. The other thing is do it into a closet that's open and blow into the clothes.
Okay.
The sound gets absorbed by all the clothes.
Right.
So it doesn't go around the whole house.
There you go.
My dog, I got to get my dog used to hearing it. So
that,
when I eventually take him out, maybe he'll actually go get something for me.
There you go.
Instead of sleeping down here on the floor for the last 2 hours.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely, like I said, I'd love to have you come back. I mean, I think we just scratched the surface. But
be happy to.
Yeah, it's been
We're going to have
awesome.
to go out and shoot some ducks is what we're going to have to do.
Yeah.
I need some real world experience.
Right. So
we can videotape it so I can show you that I can duck call. You're going to be proud of me.
Okay, I'm counting on it.
You're going to be proud.
Can I leave my calls at home?
Yeah,
please do not.
Absolutely. Worst case, I'll just mouth call them.
Right.
Wah, wah.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in today. Everybody, please go check out Brad and all the great things that he's always providing. And I know you're such a steward for the outdoorsman as well, which is, I think always part of what we love about the industry, right? Is guys are so willing to share all of their history and wealth of knowledge. And I picked up some things today where I'm like, oh, that's a really, really great idea. And so
Careful, he's going to pitch your call.
Right. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it on the lanyard, and I'm going to stick it in my pocket so he can't touch it.
So, but thank you guys for tuning in today, and we'll look forward to doing it again. And be sure to check out Brad, and we'll see you next time.